Imagine waking up one morning to find that your life has collapsed. There is no fire, there is no blood, and there are no visible wounds on your body. Yet your reputation is in ashes, your bank accounts are frozen, your allies have turned their backs, and your sanity is fraying at the edges like an old rope. You look around for the enemy, for the person responsible, but you see no one. You see only the smiling faces of friends, or perhaps the empty void of a world that has simply decided to reject you. You have been defeated. You have been conquered, and not a single punch was thrown. This is the terrifying reality of the supreme art of war. Most people believe that conflict is noise. They believe it is shouting matches, legal battles, physical altercations, or the thunder of artillery. They prepare for these loud moments. They lift weights to strengthen their bodies. They sharpen their wits for debates, and they hoard resources for a siege. But true destruction, the kind that leaves no possibility of recovery, is never loud. It is silent. It is invisible. It is psychological. History's greatest strategist, Sun Tzu, wrote a manual on war 2,500 years ago. But if you read The Art of War as a guide for moving troops across a map, you are missing the point. You are reading it like a soldier, when you should be reading it like a sociopath. Sun Tzu's darkest secret, the one that is rarely taught in business schools or philosophy classes, is that the most efficient way to destroy an enemy is not to fight them. It is to convince them to destroy themselves. It is to manipulate their reality so profoundly that they walk willingly off the ledge, believing it to be a staircase. Tonight, we open the vault on the psychology of non-kinetic warfare. We are going to dismantle the mechanisms of human perception to show you how reality is hijacked. We will look at how the mind is broken, not by trauma, but by confusion. We will explore how empires, corporations, and individuals are brought to their knees through the calculated application of silence, deception, and indirect pressure. You are about to learn how the most dangerous people on Earth operate. They do not carry weapons. They carry narratives. They do not break bones. They break minds. And by the time you realize they are your enemy, you have already lost. To understand this level of psychological destruction, we must first discard the concept of fairness. The human brain is wired for reciprocity. We evolved in small trials where cooperation was survival. If I help you, you help me. If you hit me, I hit you back. This linear cause and effect logic is the foundation of our social contract. But the master strategist, the dark empath, the Machiavellian operator, they view this social contract not as a rule, but as a weapon. They know that you expect a fight. They know that if they attack you openly, your adrenaline will spike, your defenses will go up, and you will become dangerous. The distinctiveness principle in psychology tells us that we notice and react to things that stand out. A shout, a slap, a lawsuit. These are distinct. They trigger the fight or flight response. So the master strategist does the opposite. They utilize the principle of the boiling frog. They lower the temperature of your reality so slowly that your defense mechanisms never trigger. This is the first phase of Sun Tzu's dark secret, the phase of formlessness. Sun Tzu wrote, "Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby you can be the director of the opponent's fate." How does this look in the real world? It begins with the removal of your threat perception. Consider the corporate sociopath who wants your position. They do not challenge you in meetings. They do not criticize your work. Instead, they become your echo. They utilize a technique known as mirroring and matching. They adopt your body language, your tone of voice, and your values. They lower your guard by becoming a reflection of your own ego. Freud called this narcissistic supply. By feeding your ego, they blind your judgment. You do not see a predator, you see a partner. You invite them into your fortress. You give them the keys to your vulnerabilities. Once inside, the formless enemy begins the process of erosion. This is not destruction, it is decay. They identify your center of gravity. In military theory, the center of gravity is the source of an army's power. It might be their supply line, their commander, or their morale. In an individual, the center of gravity is usually their support system or their self-belief. The formless enemy targets this connection. They do not sever it with a knife, they dissolve it with doubt. They drop a subtle comment about a colleague's loyalty. "I shouldn't tell you this, but I heard John talking about your project. I defended you, of course, but it was concerning." This is a double bind. If you confront John, you look paranoid. If you ignore it, the seed of suspicion grows. The enemy has successfully introduced a virus into your social network. They are effectively isolating you while posing as your only defender. This is the psychological equivalent of an autoimmune disease. The body begins to attack its own healthy cells. You begin to attack your own allies, believing them to be enemies, while the true enemy sits beside you, comforting you, watching you tear your own world apart. This brings us to the second phase of destruction, the strategy of noise. Sun Tzu famously said, "All warfare is based on deception." But deception is not just telling a lie. Deception is the creation of a false reality that is more compelling than the truth. To destroy an enemy without fighting, you must overload their OODA loop. The OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, is the cognitive process we use to navigate the world. We see a threat, we understand it, we choose a response, and we execute it. To paralyze an enemy, you must disrupt this loop. You must flood their system with contradictory information until they cannot orient themselves. In the intelligence community, this is known as reflexive control. It is a concept developed during the Cold War, designed to convey information to an opponent that inclines him to voluntarily make the predetermined decision desired by the initiator. You make the enemy choose the wrong path by controlling the information they use to make the choice. Imagine a relationship where one partner wants to psychologically dominate the other. They employ intermittent reinforcement. On Monday, they are effusive with praise and love. On Tuesday, they are cold and distant. On Wednesday, they are angry about a fabricated slight. On Thursday, they are loving again. The victim is trapped in a state of hypervigilance. Their brain is constantly trying to predict the pattern, but there is no pattern. The amygdala acts like a smoke alarm that won't stop ringing. The victim becomes exhausted, anxious, and compliant. They stop fighting for their own needs and start fighting merely to stabilize the mood of the aggressor. They have been subdued. The war is over, and they are living under occupation in their own home. This strategy scales up to the highest levels of power. We see it in organizational sabotage. A rival faction floods a department with bureaucratic noise, needless meetings, conflicting directives, rumors of restructuring. The targets of this campaign become so consumed with navigating the chaos that they stop doing actual work. Their productivity plummets. Their reputation suffers. Then the rival faction steps in as the saviors of order. They offer a solution to the chaos they created. They destroy the enemy by creating a problem only they can solve. It is the Hegelian dialectic weaponized. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Create the crisis, await the reaction, offer the solution. But the deepest level.
Sun Tzu's secret, the part that truly chills the blood, is the exploitation of the victim's own mind. It is the use of the empty fort strategy. In ancient China, a general with a small army was cornered in a fortress by a massive opposing force. Instead of barring the gates and preparing for a siege he'd surely lose, the general threw the gates wide open. He sat on the walls playing a lute, calm and composed. The enemy general, seeing this, suspected a trap. He believed that no one would be so foolish unless they had a massive ambush waiting inside. The enemy army retreated. This is psychological judo. It uses the weight of the opponent's paranoia against them. In the modern world, this translates to the power of silence and ambiguity. When you are under attack, the instinct is to defend, to explain, to overshare. But the master of non-fighting knows that silence is a canvas upon which the enemy projects their worst fears. If you discover someone is plotting against you, do not confront them. Do not expose them immediately. Instead, do nothing. Look at them with a slight, knowing smile and say nothing. Change your routine slightly. Stop sharing information. This silence is terrifying to a manipulator. They require feedback to adjust their tactics. Without feedback, they are flying blind. Their mind begins to race. Does he know? What is he planning? Who has he told? The predator becomes the prey of their own imagination. They start to make mistakes. They act rashly. They expose themselves. You destroy them not by attacking, but by letting them trip over the wires of their own anxiety. We must also discuss the moral cost of these strategies. When Sun Tzu speaks of subduing the enemy without fighting, he is speaking of efficiency, not mercy. In fact, destroying an enemy psychologically can be far more cruel than destroying them physically. A physical wound heals. A shattered reputation, a broken mind, a fragmented sense of reality, these are wounds that fester for a lifetime. This is the dark side of the gray rock method, usually taught as a defense against narcissists, becoming boring and unresponsive. It can also be weaponized. Imagine being on the receiving end of a weaponized gray rock campaign within a family or workplace. You are not yelled at. You are simply ignored. You enter a room and conversation stops. You speak and people look through you. You are ghosted while standing right in front of them. This is social death. Human beings are social animals. We rely on validation from others to maintain our sense of self. When that mirror is shattered, when we are treated as if we do not exist, the psychological pain is registered in the brain in the same centers as physical pain. The silent treatment is not passive. It is an act of aggressive violence. It is an attempt to erase the soul of the enemy. The ultimate goal of destroying an enemy without fighting is to induce a state of learned helplessness. Discovered by Martin Seligman, this psychological state occurs when a subject is conditioned to believe that they have no control over their environment. No matter what they do, the outcome is pain or failure. Once this state is achieved, the subject stops trying. You can leave the cage door open and they will not run. They have accepted their defeat as a law of nature. This is how cults operate. This is how totalitarian regimes maintain power. And this is how a single individual can dismantle another. They slowly remove the victim's agency. They make every choice the victim makes turn out wrong. You chose that restaurant, the food was terrible. You wore that outfit, it doesn't fit the occasion. You made that investment, you lost us money. Slowly, the victim stops choosing. They abdicate the throne of their own life. The enemy takes the crown without ever drawing a sword. Let us go deeper into the specific technique of gaslighting as a tool of Sun Tzu's warfare. Many use the term loosely, but
Gaslighting is a strategic assault on the epistemological foundation of the victim. It attacks their ability to know what is true. The goal is to replace the victim's memory with the aggressor's narrative. Sun Tzu said, "Appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend. March swiftly to places where you are not expected." In the landscape of the mind, this means attacking the victim's memories. "I never said that. You are remembering it wrong. You are being hysterical. That didn't happen." When repeated with conviction by an authority figure or a loved one, the victim experiences cognitive dissonance. The tension between what they remember and what they are being told is painful. To resolve the pain, the mind often surrenders the truth in favor of the relationship. The victim accepts the lie to keep the peace. Once they accept the first lie, the reality testing is broken. The enemy can now rewrite history. They can paint themselves as the hero and the victim as the villain. They can turn the victim's anger into guilt. "Look how you're acting. You're crazy. I'm the only one who can put up with you." The enemy has not only won, they have convinced the victim that the defeat is a mercy. Now, consider the Trojan horse of benevolence. Sun Tzu advises to offer the enemy a bait to lure him. In modern psychological warfare, the most potent bait is vulnerability. We are taught that vulnerability is strength, that it builds connection. But to the dark strategist, your vulnerability is simply a map of your soft targets. They will share a fake secret with you to induce you to share a real secret with them. This is the principle of reciprocal disclosure. "I've never told anyone this, but I feel like a fraud sometimes," they whisper. Your heart opens. You reply, "Me too. I actually cheated on my entrance exam." Snap, the trap shuts. They now own you. That piece of information is a dormant weapon. It may not be used today. It may not be used next year. But it hangs over your head like the sword of Damocles. You know they know, and because they know, you must remain compliant. You must support their agenda. You must not fight them. They have subdued you through the mere possession of a truth. This is the politics of compromat, executed at a dinner table. There is a rhythm to this destruction, a cadence that mimics the stages of grief. First, the denial. The victim refuses to believe they are under attack. He's just stressed. She didn't mean it. The formless enemy relies on this denial. It gives them time to maneuver your troops into a kill zone. Second, the anger. The victim realizes something is wrong and lashes out. But because the enemy has been subtle, the victim's anger looks disproportionate. The enemy uses this anger to paint the victim as unstable to the outside world. "See, I told you he was volatile." Third, the bargaining. The victim tries to appease the enemy to stop the subtle torment. They give up ground, they apologize for things they didn't do. Fourth, the depression. The realization that the battle is lost. And finally, acceptance, the total submission to the new hierarchy. However, there is a counter-strategy. How does one defend against an enemy who fights without fighting? How do you catch smoke with your bare hands? You must apply Sun Tzu's principles in reverse. Know the enemy and know yourself. The moment you feel confusion, the moment you feel the ground shifting, you must stop. Do not react, observe. Detach yourself emotionally from the situation. Look at the interactions as if you were a scientist watching rats in a maze. Who benefits from this confusion? Who is the calmest person in the room when the chaos starts? That is your enemy. Once identified, do not attack. Exposure is their kryptonite.
But it must be calculated exposure. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, but you must draw back the curtains all at once. You must document the patterns, the isolated incidents of gaslighting, the
subtle insults, the triangulation. Individually, they are nothing, but collectively, they form a clear picture of abuse. When you present this pattern, not as emotional complaints, but as data, the formless enemy solidifies. They become visible, and once they are visible, they are vulnerable. But the most powerful defense and the most devastating counterattack is total, genuine indifference. Not the fake silence of the empty fort, but true psychological detachment. When their approval no longer matters to you, their weapon is useless. When you no longer fear the loss of the relationship, their leverage evaporates. The moment you are willing to walk away from the negotiation, the job, or the lover, you hold all the power. The ultimate way to destroy an enemy without fighting is to render them irrelevant, to transcend the battlefield entirely. Let us return to the dark reality of the death ground. Sun Tzu wrote, "Throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight." The dark strategist uses this by backing you into a corner where you feel you have no other option but to serve them. They create financial dependency. They create emotional dependency. They isolate you from your family until they are your only world. This is the architecture of the abusive relationship. You stay because the unknown world outside seems more terrifying than the known hell inside. To break this, you must realize that the walls are an illusion. The death ground is a construct of the mind. The fear of leaving is the fence. The manipulator has built a prison out of your own anxieties. They have projected a hologram of a monster at the door. But if you walk through the door, you find only air. We must also analyze the role of the spy in your personal life. Sun Tzu dedicated an entire chapter to the use of spies. In your social circle, the spy is the flying monkey. This is a term from psychology derived from The Wizard of Oz. The narcissist or strategist does not get their hands dirty. They send their enablers, the flying monkeys, to do the harassment. They gather information for the strategist, they spread rumors, they pressure you to return to the fold. Call your mother, she's so worried about you. Why are you being so difficult with the boss? These intermediaries are often unaware they are being used. They believe they are helping. This makes them dangerous because they are sincere. To destroy the enemy, you must neutralize the spies. You must institute a strict information diet. You tell them nothing that you do not want reported back to the command center. You become a black hole of information. The spy returns empty-handed. The strategist is blinded. The pinnacle of this dark art is the restructuring of the victim's identity. We are defined by our stories. I am a good father. I am a competent professional. The enemy attacks these pillars. They manufacture scenarios where you fail. They set impossible deadlines. They trigger your children to cry in public and then look at you with pity. They slowly edit your story. You begin to say, I am a failure. I can't handle stress. Once you internalize their narrative, the war is over. You will destroy yourself to align with your new identity. You will quit the job. You will leave the marriage. You will retreat from the world believing it was your choice, never seeing the puppet strings. This is the frightening elegance of Sun Tzu's darkest secret. It is clean. It is efficient. It leaves no forensic evidence. It is the perfect crime because the victim is also the executioner. As we descend further, we must acknowledge the physiological toll of this invisible warfare. The body keeps the score. Even if your conscious mind is being tricked, your autonomic nervous system knows it is under siege. Chronic cortisol elevation, sleeplessness, autoimmune flare-ups. The formless war manifests in formed diseases. The enemy is literally killing you. Ooh, cell by cell through the medium of stress. They are shortening your telomeres. They are aging you. And they are doing it with a smile, asking if you are okay because you look tired lately. It requires a cold clinical eye to see this dynamic. It requires you to suppress your empathy. Empathy is a beautiful trait in peace, but in war, it is a vulnerability. The dark strategist relies on your empathy. They rely on you making excuses for them. They had a hard childhood. They are just under pressure. To survive, you must kill your empathy for the enemy. You must view them not as a damaged human, but as a hostile system. You do not pity a virus, you eradicate it. We see this played out in the geopolitical arena, which is simply interpersonal psychology writ large. Nations destroy other nations, not by invasion, but by demoralization. They fund fringe groups to create internal discord. They use cyber warfare to sow distrust in institutions. They weaponize migration or economics to create strain. The goal is to make the target nation ungovernable from within, to make the citizens hate each other more than they hate the external enemy. When a country tears itself apart, the conqueror simply walks in to restore order. It is the same pattern. The scale changes, but the psychology remains absolute. So how do you become immune? How do you build a fortress that cannot be breached by formless attacks? You must cultivate the unmoved mind. In Japanese martial arts, this is Fudoshin. It is a state of equanimity that cannot be disturbed by external events. It is the realization that your emotions are tools, not masters. When someone tries to provoke you, you notice the attempt, but you do not take the bait. You watch the hook float by. You must also diversify your pillars of self-worth. If your entire identity is wrapped up in your job, a workplace sociopath can destroy you. If your identity is distributed across your work, your hobbies, your family, your physical health, and your intellectual pursuits, you become anti-fragile. They can blow up one pillar, but the temple stands. You become impossible to isolate. You become impossible to define. You become formless yourself. Sun Tzu says, "Subtle and insubstantial, the expert leaves no trace. Divinely mysterious, he is inaudible. Thus he is master of his enemy's fate." To defeat the monster, you must adopt the monster's methods, but strictly for defense. You must become a ghost. You must learn to operate in the shadows of silence. When you master this, you realize that the greatest power is not the ability to inflict pain, but the ability to withstand it without flinching. The ability to see the trap and walk around it. The ability to let the enemy scream into the void while you continue your work. There are people in your life right now who are fighting you. You may not know it yet. Look for the friction. Look for the confusion. Look for the fatigue that has no physical cause. Look at who is holding the matches when your world catches fire. Do not shout at them. Do not fight them. Just see them. And in seeing them, they disarm them. The ultimate revenge is not to destroy your enemy. It is to succeed in spite of them. It is to live a life so full, so vibrant, and so autonomous that their machinations are rendered pathetic. The greatest insult to a manipulator is not your anger. It is your happiness. Your happiness proves that they have no power. Your sanity is their defeat. As we close the vault tonight, remember this. The war is not always fought on a battlefield. It is fought in the break room, at the dinner table, in the text messages, and in the silence between words. Keep your gates open, but your mind guarded. Watch the shadows, listen to the whispers, and never ever let them see you bleed. Because the moment they see blood, the sharks will circle. But if they see only a reflection of their own emptiness, they will starve. This is the art of the invisible war. This
is how you destroy your enemies without fighting. You let them become the architects of their own irrelevance. You endure, you observe, and you remain, in the face of chaos, perfectly, terrifyingly still.